Well, hello and welcome. I'm glad that you're with us as we continue our chronological read through of the Bible. Well, if you remember from yesterday, David is now a fugitive. He flees to Nob, where he meets the priest Ahimelech, who actually seems to understand that something is definitely amiss. I mean, the king's son-in-law is traveling alone. That's not something that you would expect. The palace intrigue of Saul's attempts to kill David are also likely to be known throughout the nation by now. Well, David excuses his traveling alone by saying that the king has sent him on an urgent mission, and he asks for some bread, 5 loaves, which implies that there are others with him, though not a lot of others. Now, it isn't entirely clear whether Ahimelech is trying to help David or to get away without helping him when he offers the just removed bread of the presence to David. Whatever the case, David reassures Ahimelech and he accepts the bread and requests a spear or a sword. Now, we're not exactly told how it got to be there, but the sword that David took from Goliath was in Nob. So it is given to David, and he goes on his way. David flees to Gath, where Saul would not be a threat to him. It's likely that he offered his services to King Achish, but the king's court is suspicious of David. Actually, they remember that the women of Israel are singing praises of his exploits against the Philistines. Indeed, they're able to recite those words verbatim, so they know very well what's going on. Well, to show that he's not a threat to King Achish, David feigns insanity, and the king, well, either sends him away or at least allows him to leave, noting that there are enough insane people in his kingdom. He doesn't need yet another. Well, David returns to the land of Judah, and he lives in some caves in the vicinity of the city Adullam. As people hear about it, they come to him. Actually, first his family, then some who are unhappy with Saul's reign, and then there are those who are in trouble or in debt. About 400 men altogether at this point. From there, David takes his parents to Moab and arranges with its king for their safekeeping. Remember that David's great grandmother is Ruth, and she is from Moab. And David, having provided for the safety of his parents, then goes to a stronghold. We're not actually told where that is until he's told by the prophet Gad to return to Judah. By sending David back to Judah, God has really placed him easily within Saul's reach, where it will very quickly become clear that it is God alone who is protecting David. Saul becomes aware of David's whereabouts. He accuses everyone, including his son Jonathan, of conspiring against him. No one responds to Saul, though, and actually the only person to respond to this diatribe is Doeg. He's an Edomite who was present when David received bread and the sword from Ahimelech. So Doeg accuses Ahimelech, or basically accuses Ahimelech before Saul. So Saul accuses Ahimelech of aiding and abetting David. And he summons Ahimelech and his family to answer those charges. Well, Ahimelech tries to defend himself, saying that, hey, look, David's the king's son-in-law. That's plenty of reason to help him. I mean, why wouldn't I help the king's son-in-law? And then he reminds Saul that David had been to Ahimelech many times and inquired of God in the past with Saul's knowledge. So, I mean, why should this time be any different? But Saul, of course, has no interest in Ahimelech's arguments. He's already condemned Ahimelech in his own mind, and he orders his bodyguards to kill Ahimelech and all of the priests. Well, the bodyguards want nothing to do with this. I mean, kill the high priest? That just doesn't sound like a good idea to him, and they won't do it. Well, Doeg, the Edomite, has no such compunction. And after killing the priests and Ahimelech, he goes into the town, and he destroys everything in it. Ironically, the women, the children, the animals, everything. Ironically, the very thing that Saul was supposed to have done to the Amalekites at God's command, but Saul didn't do. Only one of Ahimelech's sons, Abiathar, escapes. Abiathar goes to David and David then provides him protection. This account is actually really very, very hard to take. I mean, how can Saul do such a thing? But remember also that God had proclaimed judgment on Eli's family, and Ahimelech and all of his family are descendants of Eli. So this is apparently another step in how this will play out. For now the only one left in Eli's family is Abiathar, and he will serve as priest until Solomon actually banishes him for supporting his half-brother Adonijah as David's successor. At that point, once Abiathar is banished, God's sure judgment is complete against the house of Eli, is complete. Now, it seems that the Philistines were terrorizing a city in Israel called Keilah. David inquires of the Lord if he should go to help the city, and he's told yes, but David's men are afraid because they'll really be exposing themselves to Saul. So David inquires again, and God tells him again that the Philistines will be delivered into his hands. So he goes and he defeats the Philistines. Saul sees this now as an opportunity, for David and his men are now in a city, and he sets out to capture them. David inquires again of the Lord, and he's told that yes, indeed, Saul will come, and that yes, indeed, the people of the city will turn David over. So David leaves the city and he returns to the wilderness. Still, Saul pursues David into the wilderness, and just as he is about to overtake David, he receives a call that he has to confront the Philistines who are raiding in the land. In other words, the Lord himself effectively calls Saul away from David. It is God who is protecting David. This is made very clear. In another pursuit later, David and his men have an easy opportunity to take Saul's life. Saul is, shall we say, presented to David in a cave. But even though his men see this as a sign that God has delivered Saul into David's hands, David refuses to raise his hand against Saul, the Lord's anointed. When Saul realizes that David did not raise his hand against him, even though he could have, he acknowledges that David is more righteous than he, that David will be king in Saul's place. And he asks David to swear that he will not exact vengeance on Saul's family, but that he will let his name to continue in Israel. David makes an oath, and indeed he does not purge Saul's house when he becomes king, though we will find out in 2 Samuel that except for Mephibosheth, Jonathan's son, this is effectively done. The purging of Saul's house is effectively done when avenging blood guilt on Saul and his family against the Gibeonites. Yet even there, David will continue to show respect for Saul and for Jonathan. More on that when the time comes. It's a little bit too complicated to just try and slip in here today. That actually ends our reading for today. So once again, I pray that your reading is continuing to be helpful to you, and that you are learning and growing. May God be with you. And again, I look forward to gathering with you the next time.